Welcome once again to my channel. My name is Alex, and basically today we want to talk about one of the important topics in introduction to law. That is none other than the hierarchy of courts. It is very important that you understand as you're beginning law school, as you move from class to class, you need to understand the hierarchy of these different courts, particularly in the Ugandan jurisdiction. So now, when we talk about hierarchy of courts, we are so much interested in Chapter 8 of the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, because that's the chapter of the Constitution that establishes the judiciary. And of course, these different honorable courts fall within that arm of the government. And we need to get interested in particular Article 129 of the Constitution, which basically establishes these different courts. And that article provides specifically that the judicial power shall be exercised by different courts of judicature, which include number one, it is the Supreme Court, and number two is the Court of Appeal. We shall meet somewhere where Court of Appeal sits as Constitutional Court. We shall delve into that later. We also have the High Court. The High Court is also in the hierarchy of these different courts. Then someone will also ask you, you've not mentioned Chief Magistrate Courts, you have not mentioned Magistrate Grade 1, you've not mentioned a Magistrate Grade 2. Where are they? You've not mentioned these different tribunals that we have been seeing. So where do they fall? They are also established still under Article 129, and particularly paragraph D of Article 129. It establishes what we call subordinate courts. The three courts that we have mentioned first, they are courts of record. They are known as courts of record. Then we have the subordinate courts. And under the subordinate courts, that's where we have, for example, industrial court. That's where we have the children and family court. That's where we have the magistrate. That's where we have the chief magistrate. And that's where we have all different tribunals, tax appeals. That's where we have land tribunal, all other courts which are not courts of record. They fall within that category as established under one article or under Article 129, paragraph D. Let's now talk about or delve into the first court in the hierarchy, the highest court in the hierarchy. Which court is that? And that is none other than the Supreme Court. And in Uganda, it is important that we understand that the Supreme Court is the final court of appeal, is the first court in the hierarchy, is the highest court in the hierarchy, and it is particularly provided for under Article 130. Article 130 of the Constitution provides for the Supreme Court. It is established under 129, then explained or justified all different composition, who heads is provided for under 130, 132, and actually 133, even 131. So basically, those are what we call different provisions that provide for the Supreme Court. Who heads, composition, like that. So basically, what you need to know is that the Supreme Court of Uganda is headed by the Chief Justice. The Supreme Court of Uganda is headed by the Chief Justice. In Uganda, it is only the Chief Justice who has the capacity to be the head of the Supreme Court. Okay? That is very important that you need to understand it. Okay? So I will not talk about the composition of these courts, but we have another video that basically talks about the composition, or else we can still highlight the composition of the Supreme Court is basically the bench. 7 justices sit on the bench to hear the matter. 7 justices of the Supreme Court can hear the matter. Okay? And maybe part of it, if we may appreciate the jurisdiction, it has original jurisdiction to hear the presidential election petitions. For example, you've been contesting to be the president of the Republic of Uganda. Maybe you have lost and you believe that you didn't lose genuinely and you wish to challenge the procedure, the electoral process. So that is the only court that can hear you. As I mentioned, original jurisdiction to hear the presidential election petitions in Uganda. Okay, then it also has the appellate jurisdiction. It can hear matters or appeals from the Constitutional Court. It can hear appeals from Court of Appeal. So that means you cannot jump from nowhere and you institute a matter in the Supreme Court. That is not allowed because it can only receive appeals from the Court of Appeal or Supreme Court if the matter is not a presidential election petition. Okay? That is very, very important for us to appreciate. I want us to move at the same pace. I said it is the first court in the hierarchy. It is actually the highest court in the hierarchy. It is the final court in Uganda. When we mention, we are talking about who is the last, who is the first, it is the first court in the hierarchy. Okay? That is important for you to appreciate. Then, the second court in the hierarchy is what we call the Court of Appeal. And Court of Appeal is also provided for under the Constitution, particularly under Article 134. When you look at Article 134, it basically provides for what is a Court of Appeal, who heads the Constitution, who constitutes the Court of Appeal. Okay? And what you need to know here is that it is headed by the Deputy Chief Justice. Okay? It is headed by the Deputy Chief Justice. The appointment of these officers, we shall also talk about them. Who appoints? How comes they be? Someone is the Chief Justice today, tomorrow is not the Chief Justice, maybe some other person is appointed. So we shall delve into that, okay? But the Court of Appeal is headed by the Deputy Chief Justice, okay? And of course, as I earlier mentioned, when hearing the matter, they should not be below 5. They should not actually be the number of justices of Court of Appeal should not be less than actually 7. It should not be less than actually 7. That is very important for us to appreciate. And the Court of Appeal has the jurisdiction to hear matters or appeals from the High Court. Okay? It can hear matters from the High Court. That is important for us to understand. Okay? Then, there is a situation where a person institutes a constitutional petition. A constitutional petition is not instituted in High Court, is not instituted in a Supreme Court. It is instituted in Court of Appeal, but at that point, it is not sitting as Court of Appeal, but it is sitting as Constitutional Court. Okay? It is sitting as constitutional court, but inwardly it is court of appeal. But at that point, it is sitting as constitutional court. That's why you always hear something like constitutional court, but it is not. When you look at the hierarchy, they only indicate 3 as courts of record. But they are under within court of appeal. That's where we have the constitutional court, and it is provided for under Article 137 of the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda. It basically provides that the Court of Appeal sits as constitutional court while determining all matters relating to constitutional or questions relating to constitutional interpretation. Okay? So, in case there is a matter that requires constitutional interpretation, that matter is instituted in the constitutional court. It is court of appeal, but at that point, it is sitting as constitutional court. Look at cases of Charles Onyango Obo and Andrew Mwenda versus Attorney General. Look at cases of all cases that have Susan Chibura, all cases that required constitutional interpretation, where maybe a certain act has contravened constitutional provisions, then that interpretation to juxtapose the two to see whether actually the act contravenes, that matter goes to constitutional court. Okay, particularly under Article 137 of the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda. Okay, that is important for us to understand. I beg to repeat this. Constitutional court sits only to hear matters relating to constitutional interpretation. If there is a question that requires constitutional interpretation, that requires actually interpretation by court, it is not instituted in High Court, it is not instituted in a Supreme Court, it is not instituted in Court of Appeal, but it is instituted in Constitutional Court. Okay? That is very important. Look at the cases I mentioned. Charles Onyango Obo. Look at the case of Stella Nyanzi versus Attorney General. Look at cases of Pius Nwagaba. Okay? Okay, all those cases, if they require constitutional interpretation, they are instituted in constitutional court. Look at cases of Mifumi Uganda Limited versus Attorney General. Okay? That is very, very important. Let's now look at another court in the hierarchy, and that is none other than the High Court. High Court is the third in the hierarchy. We began with the Supreme Court. We moved to Court of Appeal, which also sits as Constitutional Court. Then we now move to High Court. High Court, particularly, is provided for under Article 138 of the Constitution, and it is headed by the principal judge, not principal justice, but it is headed by the principal judge. Okay? He is also appointed by the Judicial Service Commission. Okay? We have a video that talks about appointment of judicial officers, who appoints, who accepts, who approves. We have that video here. So, High Court is particularly provided for, when it is established under 129, then it is inwardly provided for under 138 of the Constitution. And in most cases, actually not in most cases, but matters instituted in High Court, it is only a single judge that presides over that matter. Okay? matters instituted in High Court, it is only one judge, only a single justice that hears that matter. Okay? Then what you maybe need to understand is that High Court is divided into divisions, and it is also categorized in circuits. We have close to 30 circuits now in Uganda, but particularly we have, for example, Mbarara High Court Circuit, Masaka High Court Circuit, Bushenyi High Court Circuit, we have Mukono, Guru High Court. Wherever you hear High Court, it does not mean that it has changed. It remains the High Court, but a different circuit. Okay, that is very, very important. Then I talked about divisions. These divisions, they also serve as High Court. They are actually High Court. They are they are within High Court. For example, we have civil division, we have criminal division, international crimes division, we have commercial division. They are all under High Court, but of course specializing in different areas. For example, civil division, that's particularly for matters, civil matters. When we talk about civil matters, you may say, but also commercial matters are civil. Yes, but those ones will be taken to commercial division because there is a division set up specifically to handle those matters. Okay? That is very, very important. Jurisdiction, it has original jurisdiction to hear all matters, be it criminal, be it civil. Okay? It has original jurisdiction to hear matters relating to whether civil or criminal. That is very, very important. Take time and appreciate, particularly from Article 129 up to Article 138 of the Constitution. Even Article 139 of the Constitution, they will shed light, they will shed more light on the hierarchy and composition and actually jurisdiction of High Court, of actually all courts of record. Okay, not particularly High Court, but all courts of record, right? Then what maybe we need to understand, where do we find these other courts? For example, the Chief Magistrate, the Magistrate Grade 1, the Magistrate Grade 2, and actually Magistrate Grade 2, they are being phased out in Uganda, but we still have like 1 or 2 in Uganda, but they are being phased out. Okay? So, but where do we find them? We hear about industrial court. Where do we find it? Okay? When you look at Article 129, and particularly paragraph D, it establishes what we call subordinate courts. Courts of Qadhis, Appellate, what? But that's where again we have these other courts. The magistrate, chief magistrate, under the Magistrates Courts Act, they also provide for these courts. The Magistrates Courts Act, you look at it, it also provides for these courts. Okay? And under the magisterial section, the chief magistrate court is presided over by the chief magistrate. The person that presides over, the officer that presides over the chief magistrate's court is the chief magistrate. He is also appointed by the Judicial Service Commission. Okay? Then the Magistrate Grade 1 court is presided over by the Magistrate Grade 1 officer. Still, the same goes to who presides over the Magistrate Grade 2 court. He is the Magistrate Grade 2. But of course, as I have said, they are being phased out. Okay? Then we have what we call the local council courts. For purposes of local council courts, you need to appreciate the Local Council Courts Act. You find it out and look at it. For So what you need to understand all away from whatever we've said is that get time and look at these different laws, the Constitution, particularly Chapter 6, Chapter 8 of the Constitution. Look at uh, all those articles 129, 130 up to 139 of the Constitution. They will shed more light as regards to the hierarchy of courts, particularly courts of record. Look at the establishment of subordinate courts, as I mentioned. Look at the Magistrates Court Act. What does it say as far as composition, as far as jurisdiction, as far as uh, constitution, who hears, how many magistrates hear the matter appearing or brought or instituted in the magistrate court or in the chief magistrate. Okay, the act provides. Then look at the local council courts act, jurisdiction, pecuniary jurisdiction. Okay, civil jurisdiction. Okay, criminal jurisdiction of local council courts. Take time, find it out. Okay. Otherwise, I want to thank you so much for remaining here, watching, and taking time to learn. Is very important. I encourage you to subscribe to my channel. I encourage you to share with friends. I also encourage you to comment where you find it necessary. Always comment so that we get to know your feedback for future improvement or for future advancement. Thank you. Thank you so much.